Fellow classmates, it is my great pleasure to present to you a summary of my paper entitled Is Peter the Rock? An Exegetical Study of Matthew 16 verse 18. The main problem of my text, the primary problem of this text is the identity of the Petra or the rock. Is Jesus referring to himself as the rock, or is he referring to Peter? Could the rock be Peter's confession of faith? And what are the implications of each interpretation? There are at least three views on this matter. View number one is that the rock is Peter himself. And this is, of course, linked to the idea of papal successions, with Peter as the first pope passing on his authority to subsequent popes. Second is Peter is referring to Jesus himself. He is the one who builds the church. Third is that the rock is referring to the confession of Peter. The church will be built upon the confession that Jesus is the Christ. How am I going to solve this problem? I propose 5 steps. Step number 1 is, of course, an analysis of the text. Second is to analyze the formal and the structural details. Step number 3 is a detailed analysis of the text by looking at the syntax, the keywords, and the phrase study, as well as intertextuality. Step number 4 is to examine the synthesis of the text. And step number 5 is to look at the theological interpretation and contemporary application of the text. So my methodology is, of course, a historical grammatical method, which will be used for this study. Here is my text and translation. Matthew 16:18, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Of course, here you find the play of words, Petros, which is Peter, and Petra, which is rock. What about the contextual analysis of Matthew? The authorship is Matthew, undoubtedly. The dates are a bit debatable as far as 110 AD, but I'm preferring to take an early date, as most scholars will do, which is between 50 to 60 AD. And the audience is a Jewish audience. But the purpose of the book of Matthew is very interesting because Jesus is the fulfillment of the Jewish hopes for the Messiah. The coming of the Messiah represents the climax of salvation history, the fulfillment of God's plan to bring salvation to his people Israel and to the Gentile nations. I found at least 9 themes from the book of Matthew: Christology, prophecy and fulfillment, the law, the church, eschatology, the Jewish leaders, mission, miracles, as well as the disciples' understanding and faith. The geographical setting of Matthew 16 is, of course, in Caesarea Philippi, as you can see with the arrow here. Let's take a look at the literary analysis and what I will be focusing on, what I will be going step by step in my paper. The immediate context of Matthew 16. This is very important to find out what is the immediate context The larger context of Matthew 16:18, the significance of Matthew 16:18 in the structure of the book of Matthew, the grammatical and synthetical analysis, intertextuality of the uses of the term rock in the Bible, as well as Peter's life, ministry, and death. Let's take a look at the immediate context. The preceding verses before Matthew 16:18 indicates that Jesus and his disciples had come to Caesarea Philippi. Jesus brought about the subject of who the people and the disciples think he is in Matthew 16:13. Simon Peter gave an excellent answer that you are the Son of the living God, the Messiah. Jesus confirmed that Peter's answer was the work of the Holy Spirit and who revealed to him, of course, Peter. And Jesus added that, and that you, Peter, and upon this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Whereas the larger context, when we look at the whole pericope covering chapter 16, verses 13 to 28, we find that from verse 13, Jesus asks his disciples who they think he is and ends with more explanation how he will die and be coming in glory in verse 28. So chapter 16 of Matthew emphasizes the themes Jesus, Messiah, identity, and suffering and death of the servant of the Lord prophesied in Isaiah 53. He lets his disciples understand that the Messiah had come to die in chapter 16 verses 21 to 28, the idea which they were not willing to accept in verses 21 to 23. The structure of Matthew. According to Walter Elwell and Robert Yakbar, they suggest at least four elements of the structure of Matthew. First is the genealogy, birth, and early childhood of Jesus, the preparation to ministry. Second part is Jesus' public ministry. Third is focusing on the period of Jesus' private ministry in Galilee, his ministry in Judea, and finally the fourth part is Jesus' Passion Week and the resurrection. The grammatical and syntactical. The phrase that you, Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, seem to suggest a play of words between Petros and Petra. The study of keywords in this passage is necessary to find clues to the correct meaning of the usage of these terms, Petros and Petra, in this context. And in my paper, I will do a very detailed analysis of what I'm talking about now. If you look at this table, the term Peter in Greek is Petros, which is a noun, nominative masculine singular, meaning loose, filled stone, pebble, small rock. The rock, which in Greek is Petra, is a noun dative feminine singular, which is rock and cliff. And Kai, which of course is a conjunction, and yet, but also. So from this table you see that Peter is a small stone, a pebble, whereas Petra is a rock, is a cliff, something more solid. It's a bedrock. So the syntax of the conjunction Kai and in Matthew 16 is very important to this study. The syntax of the terms Petros and Petra, Peter and the rock, is also very significant to the grammatical and syntactical analysis of this study, as well as the subject of the passage of Matthew 16:13 to 20, as well as the perspective of Matthew. Let's take a look at the syntax of the terms Petra, Petros and Petra, Peter and rock, in Matthew 16:18. The terms Petros and Petra seem to have the same meaning, but their use are not the same in this context. The term Petros is clearly referring to Peter, the disciple who is given this name by Jesus in John chapter 1 verse 42. And then uses the term Petra metaphorically to express that the church will be built on this solid rock, which is Petra. So the uses of these terms in Greek differs in the way Jesus uses them in this context, which also depicts that he was not referring to Petros and Petra as being the same thing. This is because Peter is in masculine and Petra is in feminine, which is referring to the figurative uses of the term rock in this text. What about the subject of the passage? Who am I is all about Jesus' identity and his role as the Messiah. So when we look at the flow of thoughts of the passage, it suggests that Jesus taught the disciples another role of him as the Son of God and the Messiah, that is, being the rock upon which the church of God is built. Right? So here, based on the study, the subject of the passage, that is from verse 13 to 20, is Jesus himself. He's the subject, and not Peter. What is the perspective of Matthew? The perspective of Matthew concerning Peter's character leaves no suggestion that he is the rock. The play of words here, Peter, Petros, and Petra rock, seems to bring about contrasts between Petros and Petra. This can be seen from the intertextual study of the metaphorical reference of Jesus as the rock in the Bible. And of course, this is dealt in detail in my paper. Let's take a look at this table. The intertextuality of the uses of the term rock in the Bible. Look at Psalm 118 verse 22. Jesus is the rejected cornerstone. Isaiah 28, precious cornerstone of sure foundation, referring to Jesus. Matthew 21, Mark 12, Luke 20, fulfillment of Jesus becoming the cornerstone. Acts chapter 4 verse 11, Peter quotes Psalm 118 verse 7, Jesus is the rejected cornerstone. Actually, it is very interesting here that Peter himself quoted Jesus as the cornerstone, referring to Jesus as the cornerstone, which was later accepted in the time of building the temple. Ephesians 2, this is a mistake. Paul refers to Jesus as the cornerstone, and in 1 Peter 2, 6 to 8, Jesus is the cornerstone. Peter again referring to Jesus as the cornerstone. And of course, if Peter was the cornerstone himself, or was the rock on which the church would be built, then he would not have referred to Jesus as the cornerstone upon which the foundation is built. So, in our intertextual study or in analysis, we find that there is no mention or no evidence that Peter is being referred at anywhere in the Bible as being the rock on which the the foundation of the church is built. When we look at Peter's ministry life and death, we find something very interesting. The history of Jesus' disciple in the book of Acts does not record any instance that Peter was in Rome or planted a church in Rome. Actually, when Paul went to Rome in Acts 28, he found that the Jews in Rome did not know about Jesus. If then Peter had been in Rome and was the first pope as the Catholics claim, then he would have spread Christianity ahead of Paul's arriving in Rome in Acts 28. There is no evidence that Peter was the leader of the church, except that he was recognized as one of the disciples of Jesus, who was frontline in ministering to the churches there. So it is nearly impossible to advocate that Matthew 16:18 is the biblical basis for all the popes to be successors of Peter, the disciple. My summary and conclusion. History and biblical interpretation have no evidence in regards to the claim that Peter was regarded as the rock or cornerstone upon which the sure foundation of the church is built. It is indisputable that the term rock in Matthew 16:18, based on the immediate context, the larger context, the grammar and syntax of the text, intertextual studies as well, give clues that the term rock is used to refer to Jesus, who is the cornerstone upon which the sure foundation of the church is built. There is harmony within the Bible teaching in the Old and New Testament that Jesus is the metaphorical stone which was rejected but later was accepted and upon which the church is built. Then I would suggest that Matthew 16:18 can be paraphrased as follows. You are Peter, Petros, small stone, pebbles, and upon this rock, Petra, rock bed, I will build my church, etc. This interpretation agrees with the play of words, subject of the passages, literally devices, grammar and linguistic of the text, as well as the big picture of the Bible as a whole and the metaphor that Jesus is the rock and sure foundation. Thank you.